We have to be very faithful and very courageous.
Yes.
You know, like, to get out of this mess, we have to tell the truth. We have to be strong about that. That takes courage. Courage proves faith, and faith pleases God.
Keeping our republic is on the line, and it requires patriots with great passion, dedication, and eternal vigilance to preserve our freedoms. Jenny Beth Martin is the co-founder of Tea Party Patriots. She is an author, a filmmaker, and one of Time Magazine's most influential people in the world. But the title she is most proud of is mom to her boy-girl twins. She has been at the forefront, fighting to protect America's core principles for more than a decade. Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
Trevor, thank you so much for being with me today. It's so good to see you.
Well, it's great to catch up, Jenny Beth. It's been a while, and happy to hear you're still doing what you've been doing for a long time, just mobilizing the army.
Well, and you do the exact same, and I appreciate it so much. And we've shared stages many times together. We've done so recently with Frank Gaffney's Committee on the Present Danger of China, or it's the Committee on Present Danger, China.
Yes.
How did you get involved with that?
Well, look, you know, I've always long identified that China is a massive threat to this country, the Chinese Communist Party specifically. And Frank has done the same. So we've been moving, and so, like me and yourself, we've been moving in similar circles for a long time. So when he and Brian Kennedy started the organisation, they invited me to be part of that. And I've contributed small mini documentaries to them and written several articles, etc. So yeah, we're in World War III with China right now, and they're trying to start a civil war in our country. So yes, if we don't pay attention to China, we will lose this country.
All right, elaborate on that. How are we in World War III with China, and how do you think they're attempting to start a civil war in this country?
Well, everything from the fentanyl, which is, you know, the Chinese companies that produce the precursors to fentanyl get tax incentives to do so. So the drug that's killing 80,000, 100,000 young Americans every year who will never serve in the US military, that's a tax incentive in China to do that. So they are also buying up our politicians, they are stealing our technology, they are working with our enemies in Latin America, Cuba, etc., to outmaneuver us. They're helping with the influx of illegal immigrants across the border. They are stealing military secrets, buying land in their military bases, flying balloons over our soil to identify exactly where our nuclear facilities are so they can take them out more efficiently in a nuclear attack. They are doing everything they can to destroy this country short of kinetic war. And we also know they're bringing thousands of military-age young Chinese men across the border, getting ready to do kinetic stuff here, assassination, sabotage, etc., when the time suits them. But also, I will add Black Lives Matter, the rioting of Black Lives Matter. That was completely a Chinese operation. Black Lives Matter was a Chinese Communist Party front. So yes, I can unequivocally say we're in World War III with China. It just hasn't gone yet to that final stage when armies are opposing armies. But they work on Sun Tzu's strategy, better to defeat your enemy without going into battle. Their aim is to destroy this country before their soldiers even have to march. And so they're doing that, plus they're interfering in elections, deliberately causing divisions, deliberately stoking racial tensions, with the hope that we will tear ourselves apart before they have to do it.
When you say that they were a front, that Black Lives Matter was a front for Chinese operations, I'm sure that people are hearing this and going, wait, what? How do you say that? And I'm sure there are people who are Americans who, I've always contended, there are Americans who showed up for those protests, the ones that were before they turned violent, who truly were doing so from a very well-meaning spirit. I don't think that the people that everyone who showed up was out to cause riots or disruption. But and so they're probably going, wait, how can you possibly say that?
Well, it's like the Women's March in Washington, when a million women turned up wearing funny hats. Look, most of those women weren't communists, but the leadership who organized that march all were. Communist Party USA, Liberation Road, Democratic Socialists of America. See, Black Lives Matter, it's like all communist movements. Most people who participate in these movements aren't communists. Most union members aren't communists. But the unions in this country are now completely controlled by communists who work to push this country into strikes, to push this country in a policy direction that would suit the Chinese. Black Lives Matter was run by two pro-Chinese communist organizations. The original one who started it was Liberation Road. They, Patrice Kalu's, Opal Tometi, Alicia Garza, were all affiliated with this Liberation Road pro-Chinese communist group. This group was involved with the Chinese Progressive Association of San Francisco, which works directly with the Chinese consulate. I have people on tape saying, we run our messaging past the Chinese consulate before we do anything. Our job is to protect China by bringing down President Trump. These are people directly involved with Black Lives Matter.
Were those Americans who are saying that?
Yes,
Americans. Do they understand what they're saying, do you think?
These people are absolutely Marxist, yeah.
Okay.
Alex Tom was one of them. He's a member of Left Roots, which is a subsidiary group of Liberation Road, was the head of the Chinese Progressive Association, has been to China multiple times, is a Marxist, started Asians for Black Lives, which basically directed Black Lives Matter. Absolutely, he knows what he's doing.
And I understand that Marxists and Marxism and socialism are bad, and you understand it. It seems that it's become your mission in life to explain it to other people, that this is a real problem. What is bad about it? Why is it such a bad thing? Like if someone is listening and going, well, so what if they're Marxist?
Sure.
Why is that so bad?
Well, yeah, to a lot of Americans, Marxism is a Che Guevara T-shirt,
right.
And being cool and being revolutionary. Look, it's a Judeo. America was founded on the Judeo-Christian culture, and that is a culture that says that the individual is paramount. The individual's relationship with God is the most important thing. That our rights come from God. We have a direct relationship from God. We are individuals. And that therefore the only decent society we can have is one that protects individual rights. The only role of government is to protect those rights so that man and women are free to achieve their own potential, to live by their own conscience, to stand and fall by their own productivity. That is the flower of human civilization. That is what produced America, the great wealth we have, the great prosperity, the great good this country has done. Marxism is completely collective-based. It denies God or any spiritual foundation for man. It says we are collective. We are only worth what we can provide to the collective. So therefore, if we are not productive or we are going against the trend, we are disruptive elements, it is a moral imperative to eliminate us, to destroy us, to cancel us, to shut us out. We saw this during COVID. We saw this during Black Lives Matter. What we experienced in America was Chinese Marxism, the mass line. Their idea is, it's come from Mao Zedong, there's no place for the individual. There's only the mass line. The mass must move in a certain direction. The Communist Party will decide which way we go. Everybody must conform. If you do, and during COVID, what we must do was we must mask, we must vaccinate, we must shut down, we must,
6 feet apart.
6 feet, all of it. That was Chinese mass line politics. There could be no talk about ivermectin or herd immunity or vitamin D
hydroxychloroquine.
none of that was permissible. So that was communism. What we saw was Chinese-directed communism. And how many people enjoyed that? How many people would like to live in that for the rest of their lives?
Very few.
Very few. So you have the American system based on the rights of the individual. No one can tell you to do but yourself, ultimately. Of course you're part of a collective, but you're part of the society. You can't go around ripping people off, you can't steal, whatever. But as long as you're not hurting others, you can live by your conscience. Marxism is the exact opposite. You are part of the collective, you'll do what the collective tells you, and the collective is basically run by a small group of tyrants, and you're a slave to the state. We saw a little bit of that during COVID. We see it now, there's certain things you cannot talk about in the society now. You cannot have a dissenting view. And we're seeing that with people being shut down and cancelled. That is Marxism light. Marxism full on is you are a total slave of the state. And I don't think many Americans, when they really understood that concept, would want to live by it.
No, I don't think that they would, and I don't think that they understand it.
It's just a Che Guevara T-shirt. The young kids think Marxism is a Che Guevara T-shirt and all the freedom and all the liberty we have now, plus some free stuff.
Right.
That's what they think it is.
Right.
And it is nothing like that.
And they haven't been taught truly what it is. When my children went through the public school system except for 1 year, K through 12 except for 1 year, and they were taught. There were some things that they were taught that just were shocking to me, and I'd have to sit down and have separate discussions with them. One thing is that there would be a comparison and contrast of the different kinds of governments. So they'd have a chart with basically the pros and cons listed together of socialism and capitalism and democratic socialism or whatever, trying to make it seem like, well, socialism is bad, capitalism is bad, but this quasi-socialism, capitalism is okay. And they all were just on equal footing. And I saw the same thing happen with a comparison of religions, which when I went through school, you weren't allowed to pray in school. You could have a silent moment, and some school systems did that. But they also didn't try to teach me about anyone else's religion. And my kids went through school learning about different religions in school, which I don't think is a place for the school system really
it's
at all.
Not. Look, I remember seeing a textbook from recent years from Florida, which is it was about comparative religions, and they had a 2-page article on Islam. And the Christian part was one paragraph, and it was about how white Christians had come to America and wiped out the natives. That was that was the part on Christianity.
I completely. I don't know that that's what was in my kids' textbook, but I saw the same kind of things happening in their homework. And I'd have to go back and say, you understand we are Christian, and here's why. You understand that capitalism is good, and here's why. And you understand socialism is bad. And after a while, they'd just be like, Mom, please just stop. But at least...
But they've got your kids hours and hours every week, haven't they?
They do. And thankfully, my children are great. They're 21 now. They are great adults, and they're very well grounded. But if you don't realize that's happening with your kids and you don't counter it, then you wind up with this generation or 2 generations in our country that don't understand what socialism is. They don't understand what Marxism is. And they don't even understand the greatness of America.
Well, that's it. Most of these young kids unconsciously believe that America got rich off slavery, America got rich off ripping off the third world. They don't understand the struggles that the American founders went through to create a whole new society like one had never been seen before. the great liberation that occurred, the prosperity that came from that, but also the incredible good that America's done in the world, the countries that America's liberated, the missionaries that America has sent out, the hospitals and schools that America has built all around the world, the wars that America has fought to save people from tyranny. This country has the richest, most dynamic history the world has ever seen, and most young kids are completely oblivious to it, and all they see is the faults of America massively magnified, as that was all America was about. So it's no wonder the military is having trouble recruiting. It is no wonder that young brainwashed kids are rioting in our streets and saying death to America, because this is what they've been taught. And I think that COVID did us a little bit of a favor in some ways, because millions of Americans finally got to sit down and watch their kids' Zoom sessions and read their kids' books and thinking, what?
Right.
Is this what they're teaching our children now? Look, the education unions in this country are run by Marxists. They decide what textbooks are allowed in the schools. The Department of Education is run by Marxists. They have an agenda, and so they can promote their agenda to the whole country. The people who write the textbooks are Marxists. There are probably 500,000 Marxists in America, but they get themselves into the key positions that can influence children, that can influence churches, that can influence mass organizations. That is what we need to be aware of. We look at, some communists will stand for Congress and you'll get 17 votes, and we laugh. But we don't know that communist's best friend is running the textbook section of the local Department of Education, choosing what textbooks your kids learn. We don't know that the other person in that little communist cell is running the local teachers union. They control the peaks of power. They get themselves into those positions of power that can influence millions of people. That's why we should be scared of the revolution.
How do they do that? How do they get in those positions of power? And how do they know that that's what they should be doing?
Well, they study. This is a very organized thing. Lenin took over Russia with 2,000 Bolsheviks. Fidel Castro took over Cuba with 80 men starting. So Marxism, people say communism is a complete disaster. When it's implemented, yes, it is, because it destroys productivity, it destroys freedom, it destroys souls. But as a system of organization, it is brilliant. Marxism, Leninism. Lenin was an organizational genius. He laid out in his works how you take over a union. You get a few people in there, you get one or two voted onto the executive, because nobody wants to do these jobs.
Right.
So they get a couple of guys voted on the executive. They get a couple more voted on the executive. Then they hire the union secretary. Then they hire their friends as organizers. And in 2 or 3 years, they completely control a union of 500,000 members. And they start dictating the policies. And so the union guys are thinking, these union guys are patriots. So why do we care about Palestine? Why do we just spend $500,000 of our union dues on Black Lives Matter? Well, I better not say anything, because they'll take my union ticket off me, and I won't be able to get a job then. So they do that in churches. They do that in universities are key. You just get a couple of left-wing professors, and they work their way up. They become heads of department. They only hire people like them. See, like a conservative professor or a head of department will hire a liberal if they're really, really good at their job.
Right.
If they're a great history teacher or a great psychologist, they can get hired. But when a liberal or a Marxist takes over the head of a department, they will only hire Marxists. So you get, most of our great colleges now are run by Marxists. Harvard, Yale, the 90% of the college faculty in most universities are left-wing or Marxist now. and they will freeze out and persecute and ostracize any conservative. So the conservatives either completely shut their mouths or they leave. And so it's not hard over periods of 10 or 15 years to completely take over a university, take over a Bible college, take over a union. It's an organizational science. If you have a small group of people intent in taking over one organization, it only takes them a few years to do it. And once they've got it, they've got access to your union dues, your school fees, your money. They go for the money, the influence, and the respectability. So they take over churches, unions, because this is a massive source of money that they can then use to fund Black Lives Matter or the Women's March or a protest group or an environmental group that wants to shut down drilling or fracking or whatever. And so it is a science. It's a science. How Lenin wrote how to take over organizations, how to take over a country. And if we do not know what these people are doing, we are easy meat.
How did you come to learn so much about this? And how did you wind up in America? Because you're not from America, are you?
No, I got a southern accent from New Zealand. Okay. Look, back in 1984 in New Zealand, see, my country was saved by America in World War II. You know, it was your fathers and grandfathers and uncles who stopped the Japanese in World War II from invading my country. So we are very grateful, you know, as we should have been. But in 1984, we elected a socialist Labour government, and one of the first things they did was to ban nuclear warships from our harbours. You know, it's all anti-nuclear. We don't want to stand against we're for peace. Well, because America was the only country sending nuclear warships for our harbours, that destroyed the Australia, New Zealand, United States military alliance. Now, when I was fighting against this, I met a New Zealander. He was a Dutch New Zealander who had infiltrated the New Zealand Communist Party for our security services. So he was like a government spy inside the Communist Party. And he rose his way up the ranks. And in 1983, he was sent to Moscow for training at Lenin's Institute for Higher Learning. It was 3,500 students training at the school from all over the world. And they were taught how to implement communism in their home countries. And at the time, the Soviets were trying to destroy NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, so they could invade Europe. And they were very explicit about this. They were telling the people there, we want to invade Europe, but Reagan and Thatcher are too tough. NATO is too strong. So what we're going to do is take New Zealand out of the nuclear alliance because it's easier and we control more people in New Zealand. We control a Labour Party, we control the unions there, we control the peace movement, and we hope that will encourage the peace activists in Europe to take down NATO so we can invade Europe. And so that was the plan, and what my friend basically taught me was this. This is how the communists work. The Chinese or the Russians come up with a policy. It might be socialized healthcare in America. It might be open borders in America, an end of fracking, pipeline shutdowns. It might be allowing Iran to develop the nuclear weapon, whatever it is. And so they will train the American communists or the Canadian communists or the Mexican communists in the program they want. They will go back to America. They will make it union policy because they control all the unions, and the unions make it Democrat policy. So this is it. The unions are all communist controlled in America now. They are the transmission belt of communist policy to the Democratic Party, because there's not a Democrat in this country who doesn't get elected without union help.
Right.
But if the unions are all controlled by the communists, they then start dancing to the communist tune. You know, Obamacare is a communist policy. Nuclear deal with Iran, communist policy. open borders, communist policy. Mass transgender promotion, communist policy. Who enforces this? This is the unions. They make it Democrat policy because the Democrats do what the unions tell them to do. And the proof of this is this. Before 1994, American unions weren't communist. They were George Meany, Lane Kirkland. They were American patriots. They were union guys, but they still loved America. In 1994, they were thrown out. John Sweeney, the Marxist, was installed as president. They removed the anti-communist clause from the AFL-CIO's constitution. All these 60s radicals, communists, all started becoming union organisers, union presidents. The unions went to the left and the Democrats followed them. Now, you remember back in the 1990s, early 90s, whatever, Harry Reid and Bill Clinton got, the horrors of illegal immigration. The 250,000 coming across the border a year. This is a disaster for American workers. We must stop this. This is terrible. Okay? The unions flipped. The unions changed their policy from opposing illegal immigration to supporting illegal immigration in 2000, and the Democrats flipped straight afterwards. Now Bill Clinton's, we've got to welcome the illegal immigrants. The Democrats are all about illegal immigration. That was done by Eliseo Medina, Executive Vice President of SEIU, a Marxist who became Obama's immigration advisor. And so it was Eliseo Medina who got the AFL-CIO to flip their policy in 2000 from absolute opposition to illegal immigration, because they understood that illegal immigrants would break their strikes, they would lower the wages of their workers, take their workers' jobs, so they rightly opposed it. But then they realised, under the influence of the Marxists, that if we welcome the illegals, we're going to have millions more Democratic voters and we're going to have permanent power in America. So there's an example right there. The communists decided they wanted mass illegal immigration. They got the unions to change their policy from opposition to promoting it. The unions flipped the Democrats, and now we have our borders being flooded. This is completely a communist operation. 100%.
Why do communists want illegal immigration in America?
Because they want a complete monopoly on power. They want to destroy the Republican Party. See, Hillary Clinton promised to legalize every single illegal immigrant within 100 days of taking office. Thank God Trump won.
Yes.
Okay. But now they're going back to this. If they can bring in 15, 20, 30 million new illegal immigrants into the country, A, it impoverishes American workers, which makes them easier to control, but B, it gives them, these people will vote 90% Democrat when they're given citizenship and voting, right? So you legalize 20, 30, 40 million illegals, you have then got 16, 24, 25, 30 million new Democratic voters. And as most presidential elections are won or lost by less than 5 million votes, what do you think that's going to do to America? That will give the Democrats, who are now controlled by the communists, complete power that can never be overthrown. That is their road to the one-party state. So they can enforce what they've already done to California across the whole country. But worse, way, way worse. So illegal immigration is the road to the revolution. And the only reason we have it is because the communists took over the unions and the unions made the Democrats flip. And the Democrats understand if the unions withdraw support, they will lose their seats.
Why is that important for communism to be successful in a country?
Because communism can have no opposition. Communist ideas are terrible. And if there is if people can argue against it and people can be, if you sit down, a communist and someone who believes in freedom, and they have a debate and 1 million people are watching that debate, everybody will see what a loser the communist is. Everybody will see we're far better off for freedom. So therefore that freedom argument must be shut down, must be completely cancelled. That is why we are conservatives being shut down on the internet, why conservatives have been shut down on Facebook. You know, Facebook is controlled by Marxists.
Yeah.
Completely. That is why in a free, open debate of ideas, communists lose every time. They can only get power by completely shutting down any opposing argument. That is why you're talking about the textbooks. The kids are not given an argument freedom. They're not told, this is freedom, this is communism, this is what communism will do to you, this is what freedom will allow you to do for yourself. They're just given a few variants of different forms of socialism, and that's the only option they're given. So every communist country, when they achieve power, they completely shut down debate. They put their opponents in jail, they kill their opponents, because there can only be one party line. That is why I talked about before the mass line. What did we see during COVID? If you're a doctor and you wanted to talk about vitamin D therapy, how far did you get? You know?
Well, you lost your medical license, you were sued,
Yeah.
some were threatened with jail, and you certainly were canceled on Facebook. But that seems minor compared to losing your entire livelihood.
Well, that's why we still have a semi-free society. You imagine if these people had total power. Do you think you would even dare to challenge the party line? You know, when your whole life depends on what the government, your favour with the government, you've got to, you know, you buck the government, you will either be dead or in jail. And so will your kids. In North Korea, they punish you to 3 generations. If you're a man and you're caught with a Bible, for instance, you don't just get executed. Your kids go to the gulag and your grandchildren go to the gulag, even if they were completely innocent. So this is what I'm saying. We do not understand how bad tyranny can get because we live in the freest, richest country the world has ever known. We don't really understand how people like North Korea can live. We don't think it would ever happen here. But we saw a taste of it during COVID, just a taste of it. You imagine those people who did the COVID lockdowns had complete power with no elections, no opposition, how militant they would have got and how cruel they would have got had they got the chance.
So there are some people, even who are Republicans and conservatives, who are I don't want to say that they're not as conservative as us, because I think they truly are as conservative as us, but they're just not as jaded as we are. Like, I can imagine this happening in our country. Watching what happened with COVID terrified me, and it also made me realize just how easily Americans will just go along and how few are willing to stand up and speak the truth. Because the risk of doing so is so severe, and how many went around wearing their mask and everything. I did wear a mask when I was on an airplane because I had to travel still, but I wasn't wearing a mask otherwise. And they were like, well, you have to. It's the rules, or the people yell at you. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I want to be able to breathe. It's kind of more important to me than what anyone else says. Exactly. But and I just sat there going, that this is how other countries change, and they go from a seemingly free society or freer society than complete tyrannical control, and I don't know, it's bizarre and then they want to just forget it and not think that anything that just happened only 4 years ago happened.
Well, that's right. They want a free pass for their tyranny. Look. When I was a kid, we used to say, how could the Russians have accepted communism?
Now I know.
Yeah, exactly. How could the Germans have accepted Nazism? Well, now you know.
Right.
Because a government gets powerful and they start to persecute those who buck the trend, and you're thinking, do I really want to lose my job here?
Right.
Do I really want my kids not to have a good education? So I'll just go along with this. Doctors who took a Hippocratic oath to never do any harm routinely violated it because they were scared of losing their jobs. And the very few that stood up against it took all sorts of persecution. And that was in the freest, richest country the world has ever known. You imagine if the World Health Organization or Fauci had complete power. Imagine if Fauci was the Minister of Health in a communist government. Imagine how tyrannical it would have got. We would have had quarantine camps that people would have been put in. We would have had, massive fines for people whose masks slipped a little bit below their noses or whatever.
Well, he went to baseball games and sat in the stadium all by himself with no mask on and would have invited all his friends to go. Well,
see, this is the thing. The communist elites don't do what we have to do. I have a friend, we did it in our film Enemies Within, which we interviewed a guy who'd been in the same communist group as Obama as a young man at Occidental College, John Drew. And I said, John, you were a communist. He said, yep, he's a Christian conservative now. But he said, I was a communist. He said, when you took over power in America, would you have worked in a factory like everybody else? Would you have followed the rules? He said, oh, no. I would have been the Minister of Culture or something like that. I would have had thousands of people working under me. I would have enjoyed the greatest luxuries. I would have had all the food. I would have had the travel. I could have done what I want. The other people would have to conform. You got to see this. What people need to understand about communism. Communism isn't about sharing the wealth. Communism is really about concentrating all wealth and all power in a very few hands. The head of North Korea, he has Swedish mistresses. He has all the cars he could possibly want. He dines on caviar every day. Fidel Castro was one of the richest men in the world, while his people were getting 1 pound of chicken a month. We got to understand, communism is about these wise people who know far better than us about how we should run our lives, having complete power and telling us what to do. And as a reward for that great responsibility of running our lives, it's only fair that they should enjoy a few luxuries in life. That's the rationale of communism.
It's absolutely horrible, and I do not want to happen here. And I think that we're on the precipice of it.
Very close.
And if we are not careful and we don't do the right things, we could tip in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. This is the time. I think we're going to need a little bit of God's help here. And we have to be very faithful and very courageous.
Yes.
To get out of this mess, we have to tell the truth. Right. We have to be strong about that. That takes courage. Courage proves faith, and faith pleases God. This is a spiritual battle here. This is good versus evil. This is the dark powers of the world versus light versus good. This is Cain versus Abel. Communism is the Cain spirit. Jealousy, resentment, anger, rebellion. Abel is loyalty, fidelity, courage, productiveness, humility. Those are the two spirits in America right now. And the Patriots represent the Abel spirit, and the tyrants, the communists, the people with them, they represent Cain. They're all about evil. Well, we have to be able people, and we have to defeat the Cain people. That's the battle that's been going on for a long time, right. And we're seeing it playing out right in front of our eyes now, and that takes courage. But courage proves faith. Where does your courage come from, if not from your faith? Any soldier who goes into battle knows you're facing a horrible enemy. If you have faith in your officers and you have faith in your comrades, and if you have faith in God, you do not fear any enemy. You do not fear anybody. Right. You'll be the best soldier you can be, and that's what we have to be now.
It is true, and some people, and I've met some of these people over the last 4 years, when the Tea Party movement started, there was anger and outrage, and we were expressing ourselves, and we've learned how to do other things, trying to pass legislation and win elections so that we can pass legislation. But over the last 4 years, there are people, and we were targeted by the IRS, and we endured a lot. So and it took courage to be able to just go, I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to dissolve the organization, and we will do the best that we can with what we have before us. But there are people right now who have gotten involved and have done so at great risk. Like they were the only ones in their schools saying no to the tyranny as students, or they were the only family in a community or in a neighborhood who was walking outside without a mask on, or saying no to some of the mandates, or doctors who wound up getting canceled. And these are things that we wouldn't have thought would have required courage 5 years ago.
Exactly.
But we learned quickly that it does. And I think that the breed of people who have become active because of that kind of tyrannical oppression that they experienced, many people folded, so many people folded, but the ones who did not, I think, can help us all lead the way for where we have to go. You just have to maintain that strength and faith.
Look, 100%, you know, like people have been, I think this is a time for testing.
Yes.
You know, and look, and I'll say this, and this might be a bit controversial. In some ways, I'm sort of glad that the election was stolen from President Trump, because President Trump was a leader who did a lot of great things, but a lot of people thought, well, the battle is over now.
Yes.
And if he'd got a second term, which he did get, but which he got, but if he had served that second term, a lot of people would have gone, hallelujah, I can just go back to just doing nothing now. You know, we got in the position we were because too many good people did nothing.
Right.
And so we trusted our leaders, we trusted our religious leaders, we trusted our political leaders. That proved to be a mistake. President Trump came along, but then our noses were rubbed in it. Our noses were rubbed right in it. And enough Americans have thought, well, no, Trump's not going to save us. No leader's going to save us. The American people have to step up now. And what we're seeing now is this hardened bunch of people who have seen tyranny in their face, who have seen Chinese-inspired Black Lives Matter rioters destroying cities with no compensation. We're seeing the flooding of the borders, and millions of people are now waking up to the fact that we could lose this country. And so we're seeing a new breed come forward, a very hardened, very tough, and courageous. That's what's going to save America.
It will.
That is what's going to save America. It's going to be the grassroots Christians and conservatives who've had enough, who love their kids, love their God, love their country, faith, family, freedom, are going to stand up and take this back. And they are doing that. You know, any other country would have fallen decades ago.
Yes.
Any other country would already be communist. But this country has a special spirit. You know, they've fought for their freedom here. They established a republic where man's rights come from God, not from government. And that is a legacy that is very, very hard to destroy. And it's a legacy that's being rediscovered. And so that is why I'm still very optimistic about this country.
I am even optimistic about the generation, well, not even just a generation, the high school class of 2020 and the college class of 2024. It's the same class. The same ones who had high school graduation canceled are dealing, many of them have had their college graduation canceled. And I hope that those students, I think they're fed up with what the experts and the adults have done. And I hope that they go, wait, we can't allow this to continue to happen. And I hope that they have the courage to stand up and embrace freedom as they leave college and go into the world and become full-fledged adults.
Look, I think that's exactly right. And you see the growth of organizations like Turning Point USA. You see
And Charlie does such great work.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you see the popularity of Dennis Prager's videos amongst young people and all this. And you see this, and yes, this is a time for new leadership. But people of our generation, we have to be helping these people. We have to be being as courageous as we can to inspire these people. They are there. They want the right things. They love America. They love their liberty. They've seen how fragile it is. And they want that inspiration. They want that leadership. But they will be the next generation coming through. But we still have to play our role in that as much as we possibly can. But yeah, that's what gives me a lot of hope for the future, is those young people who are just, in many ways, the younger generation are more conservative than their parents.
Right.
Many, the parents had it real soft and real easy. These kids are facing a harder time.
It's true. I was a teenager during the Reagan years. Well, a child and a teenager during the Reagan years. And we did have the Gulf War, and we went through the terrorist attacks in America. But those didn't really, they were horrible events, and unless you were living in D.C. or living in New York, they didn't affect the rest of the country as completely personally as the people who, especially the people who had family in the World Trade Center. And we haven't been through what my kids have had to go through. My children, they were the class of 21 in high school, and I just look at the things that they've had to go through and their friends have had to go through, and I'm like, wow. I still want to protect them, and I also know they now are becoming adults and are going to have to step up and start bearing the responsibility. But they've been through more than any of us could ever imagine because of the lockdowns and the insanity that the experts and the adults imposed on them.
Yeah, they have that, and the indoctrination, and they're looking at the future of the country, and they're seeing that it's going to be pretty bleak unless something changes.
Yes.
And so, there's a lot of responsibility in those kids, a lot.
Right.
And there are a lot of leaders already coming forward now, young people that I interview quite regularly. They are fired up for this, for saving this country. Well, all of us now have to step up and nurture this movement and use our influence, use our skills to help it grow, to provide leadership or help when we can. It's a real flowering here of people who understand what America is about. So I'm optimistic, but I'm not blind to the challenges either. But this is why I think this is a spiritual battle. This is good versus evil here. It's very stark now. You can't ignore it now. It's in our faces. And I think Americans are going to rise to the occasion. But it's still a fledgling movement, and we still have our role to play.
Right.
And we cannot abandon that role.
And look at what Benjamin Franklin did. He helping start this country when he was so much older and could have not been engaged at all. And okay. Yeah,
he guided those young, most of those founding fathers were in their 20s or 30s.
Right.
He was the only old guy,
Right.
And so, but he was needed. He moderated them. He guided them. He helped them. But they had the energy.
Right.
And then they looked up to him. So we got to try and be Benjamin Franklins as much as we can,
That's right.
So, we all got kids. We all got grandchildren, Why are we fighting? We're fighting for them.
That's right.
That's what we're fighting for. And we want those kids to live freer than us.
Right.
And that's going to take some work on our part.
A lot of work on our part. I want to go back to two things that you said before. One at the very beginning, I just want to highlight, and I'm hoping I can do a podcast on this at some point. But you mentioned that China is Chinese companies are manufacturing the precursors for fentanyl. And we don't have to go into a lot about that. But one thing that I think is really important, and I just read about this in the last couple of days, is that the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party has an entire report about that very thing, and that the Chinese government is offering tax incentives to corporations to produce these drugs that kill Americans and that are illegal here or illegal in their own countries.
Yeah.
And what you said with that, it may be new when people hear it and they may be thinking, what is he talking about? And I just want to point out there are government documents on it, and it's it's a huge deal.
It's a huge thing, but it's not going to be on the front page news. It's not going to be broadcast. Look, that should be the hugest story for days.
Yes.
80,000 young Americans. There's hardly a family in this country is not touched by drugs in some way. A cousin or a son or a daughter is not touched by this. The Chinese are deliberately doing this. This should be all over the news.
It should be.
But we have got so many people in Wall Street and Hollywood and government compromised on take of the Chinese Communist Party, getting their money, getting their, was that they want to keep the gravy train going. So they're going to minimize. They're going to make sure this news doesn't get to everybody, because we should be absolutely furious about that. That's more people who died in the whole Vietnam War are dying every day as a result of a deliberate Chinese government program where they're giving tax incentives. Can you think of anything more evil than that?
No.
That's war. This is why I say we're in World War III. If they sent a rocket over here and hit Los Angeles and killed 10,000 people, we'd call out war, but we allow them to send their drugs over here and kill 80 to 100,000 a year. But that's not war.
You're right in your assessment of it, and it's just when I heard that about that report, I was shocked, and my schedule has been jam-packed, but I'm trying to read and understand everything about it right now, because we all know people who've been affected by it, and I meet people as I travel around the country whose children have been affected by it, and I want to be able to say, look, go watch this video that the House bipartisan committee put together, and understand this is an issue and we need to be elevating it and amplifying it. When you were talking about New Zealand and how the communists were trying to get out of NATO, and NATO still exists, one of the things that I have noticed is people have been talking about the Ukraine-Russia war, and I have a lot of trouble talking about that. I think there's a legitimate argument to make and a debate to have about how much money, or if any money, and how much should be given to other countries, considering how much money we spend. But I also know Russia's controlled by a former KGB agent, and when a country invades another country and says, I'm taking this, it's my land now, that's an act of war. And we can't be naive enough to think that's not an act of war. But what I've noticed among some people is, well, maybe we don't need to give money to NATO. Maybe NATO isn't important. Maybe we don't need to be involved in NATO. And that's people on our side of the aisle. And I'm not a national security expert, and I'm not from a foreign country like you are. But when you mention that about NATO, what do you think is the chatter, that kind of chatter has happened among the grassroots on our side? What do you... Yeah,
well, look, and this is a very contentious issue. And,
it is.
And it's one that's very hard to talk about rationally. The argument is if you support Ukraine or you support NATO, you support Biden.
Right.
And we all hate Biden, right? So, look, I say this. The free nations of the world have four major enemies, right? Five major enemies. They have China, they have Russia, they have Iran, they have the World Economic Forum, well, six, the United Nations and the Biden administration. You look at what Biden's doing with Israel. Israel was attacked. They're trying to defend themselves. Biden says, we love Israel. We're Israel's friend. but you can't go after Hamas, and we're going to give a whole bunch of money to Iran, and we're going to give a whole bunch of money to Hamas as well. He is playing a double game. Well, he's doing the same thing in Ukraine. Look, if Biden had wanted to stop Putin, really, Biden has been working for the Russians since the 1970s. He is their man. You know, we need to understand this. If Biden had really wanted to stop Putin, he would have said, Mr. Putin, if you step over that border, we're going to open up the energy fields of America. We're going to flood the world with oil. We'll drop the price of gas to $1 a gallon. That will make America richer. We can give oil to our European allies, and you'll go broke. Because he is funding his war off the high prices of oil, which Biden is deliberately keeping high by restricting supplies here. So that's what he could have done. Instead, he said a limited incursion into Ukraine would not warrant an American response. So that was a green light. So Putin attacks. Then Biden slow walks everything he possibly can. He's just keeping it alive. So look, I say this. Without NATO, Europe would have been conquered a long time ago. If Ukraine is allowed to fall, they have already said, Putin has already said, the Baltic states are next, Romania's next. Medvedev, Russia's Prime Minister, Putin's ally, said that the goal of the Ukraine war is to create a pan-Eurasian home stretching from Vladivostok, which is near Japan, to Lisbon, the westernmost city in continental Europe, meaning all of the whole thing. They've already also said that Alaska belongs to Russia and that the borders of Russia really go down to Mexico. So can you believe this? So look, this is really analogous to Nazi, and so to get Americans to accept the Russian line, they have flooded our media with anti-Ukraine propaganda. Zelensky's horribly corrupt. It's all about the, it's blah, 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 blah. Virtually all of this is lies.
Right.
Look, every American who's lived under Trump should understand that half the world believes that Trump said Mexicans were rapists, that Trump is a racist, that conservatives are horrible Nazis in this country. We lived through several years of a propaganda demonization campaign directed against Trump and Trump supporters. We need to understand exactly the same campaign is being directed by the Russians and the Chinese against the Ukrainians. Exactly the same kind of campaign.
Yeah.
Most people in the world think, a lot of people in the world think Trump is a horrible, horrible person. A lot of people think Zelensky is a horribly corrupt person. There's no actual evidence of this. None at all. If he was this horrible, corrupt person, why didn't he take all his money and his yachts and leave and go and live in Greece or somewhere?
And just cede the country.
And cede the country instead of enduring multiple assassination attempts and standing by his country while they're facing a horrible enemy. I think, look, I'm a bit of a Reagan conservative. I believe you've got an evil empire out there, which is now Russia, China, Iran, Venezuela, China, etc. And you've got a semi-free world that's struggling, led by America, which has a president who's basically a traitor, but has a population that's basically patriotic. And we've got to support our friends around the world. And it's the free people of the world right now against the tyrants. If Ukraine is allowed to fall, we're going to see World War III, because they are going to use nukes on Western Europe. They will destroy NATO. The only reason they're not using nukes now is they can't attack a country right next door to them with nukes. But if Ukraine falls, they will use nukes on Germany or France. They'll use nukes on us. So my narrative runs very counter to what is now common in the conservative movement. But we need to understand for 15 years now, the Russians have been pouring huge amounts of propaganda into the US conservative movement to neutralize them, to even make them think Putin is our friend. And this has caused a lot of division in our movement, to the point you can't even talk about this issue to many people.
You really can't. And thank you for answering that, and answering it honestly and with such authority. I'm not a national security expert at all. There are just certain things that I look at and I go, a country trying to move its borders, you cannot deny that is an act of war. If it happened here, we would respond. And when I look at what happened to Israel, we would respond. And we would not allow that to happen here. And I think, what would our country do if it happened to us? And I don't want to spend. We spend way too much money in this country, and I also understand we are a superpower. Whether we like it or not, we are a superpower, and we do enjoy the benefits of being a superpower every single day of our life.
Absolutely.
But with that superpower status does come responsibility, and sometimes we have to step up even when we don't want to. And
well, I think the real point is, Americans, the horrible thing is Americans have been led, mainly by Democrats, into these horrible no-win wars, time and time again, from Vietnam to Iraq to Afghanistan. You spend all this money, you're not allowed to win.
Right.
And that dispirits people, and I understand this, absolutely.
And the attorneys get completely involved with the military, and it makes it very hard to...
Look, the last war we've been allowed to win was World War II, where the whole country was behind the troops. There was a very clear objective. You stop the Japanese, you stop the Nazis, and the soldiers knew what they were doing. But from Vietnam to Korea and Vietnam onwards, they were never allowed to win. So the Republicans should be saying this. Look, we want Ukraine to be free. We would like to see Putin deposed. We would like to see a free Russia. We are going to support Ukraine. We're going to bring them into NATO and let them win. A clear objective, let them win. And we are going to, whenever we send our troops overseas, if we ever do, we're going to give them everything they need to win. And we're going to bring them home the day they achieve victory. That's it. But you are right, as a superpower, America does have a responsibility. But what has jaded so many people, and I can fully understand why. If I was a veteran fighting in Afghanistan, seeing my friends killed in a war you're not allowed to win, I would be pretty disgusted. And absolutely. But that's not how it should be.
Right. And we see the evidence of the war as we see people who are walking around who no longer have their legs or their arms. They've lost their limb, and it weighs on all of us as a society.
Yeah. Well, you look at President Trump. We had 4 years of the most peaceful time we've had because our enemies feared him.
Right.
Absolutely. You look at President Biden, everything's turning to garbage now because he's working for the enemy. He is helping the enemy. He's saying we support Ukraine, but he's keeping the world price of energy high, which is what Putin is using to fund his war. And so the world is turning to garbage because we have a very weak president in the White House. Peace through security, Reagan's doctrine. Keep the military strong, use it very sparingly, and when it is used, let them darn well win. That's the way forward.
Trevor, I know that you have limited time today. I really appreciate the fact that you've been with me and that we had this discussion. I hope we can do it again sometime. I love talking with you.
Love it, Jenny Beth.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, and thanks to all the listeners.
The Jenny Beth Show is hosted by Jenny Beth Martin, produced by Kevin Mooneyhan, and directed by Luke Livingston. The Jenny Beth Show is a production of Tea Party Patriots Action. For more information, visit teapartypatriots.org.
If you like this episode, let me know by hitting the like button or leaving a comment or a 5-star review. And if you want to be the first to know every time we drop a new episode, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for whichever platform you're listening on. If you do these simple things, it will help the podcast grow, and I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.